Can you guys hear me clearly through this, or should I just speak without the mic? It's fine? Okay. How many of you were here the previous serverless meetup? Yeah, I do recognize a couple of faces. So I quickly spoke about what I would be speaking about today, which was the Jamstack and a different way of building websites. I always feel like there'll be some people who I can't see because of this poll, but hope that's okay. Yeah, should we do that? But anyway, so my name is Bhavana Srinivas. I work as a solutions architect at a company called Netlify. I do have some fun stickers and swag here if you want to decorate your workspace. But anyway, so Netlify, for those of you who haven't heard, we help build and host modern web applications. And these are, when I say web applications, I mean static sites. So Netlify, it provides like a CI/CD pipeline and hosting to build and then to put your static site up. But let's talk more about what you can do with a static site and where serverless fits in. So last time I spoke about this concept called the Jamstack. Jamstack is a new way of building web applications where you decouple the front end from the back end. So it's a way where you can build static sites that are fast, secure, and simple to work with. So instead of, what do you all think of when I say static sites? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Anything else? Okay. No ability to interact, okay. Okay, yeah, I mean, you're all there. You are talking about some attributes of what static sites were, but they have been evolving over time, right? Like, so the first few websites that anyone put up was static because the client would make a request. Some server somewhere was going to return HTML, and a browser would display it, right? That was a static site. It had some content, it had some tags, it had some navigation, purely HTML and CSS. And this is like, I'm talking back in the day when we first started building websites. And then things changed. People said that we want to do more with the site. We want it to be flashier. We want it to be more dynamic. We want it to have cool graphics. And technology also evolved so that that was possible. Like the LAMP stack architecture became really big because SQL databases became mainstream and you were able to do server-side processing. So every time a client made a request, things would happen in the back. And you'd go query the database, you'd pull out the content, you'd put it together with plugins and themes, and then you would build that website. You would build that website and return it to that client on the fly every time someone makes a request. That was how we built websites, and that's how a lot of websites are being built today. I call that the monolithic architecture. So if it's built with like a WordPress or a Ruby application or a Rails application or Drupal, for instance, these are the kinds of sites that you interact with, and this is what people call as dynamic sites, right? And then there's, again, technology evolved, and front-end developer workflows evolved. Like, you have so many build tools now that developers interact with and compile their sites with. And Git became a massive phenomenon where you version control your software. And your browsers have become way more powerful. They can interact with third-party services. You can run JavaScript on them. They're like their own operating system. You can run like, JavaScript or WebAssembly on it. And so all this led to a point where people were saying, okay, why do we put this application, web application, only in one origin? Why not distribute it? Why not, if all the user intends to do is interact with the front end, let's separate the front end from the back end, build this front end as a static site, host it on a CDN, which is distributed all over the world, and then you make requests to it, and all you're doing is retrieving static sites. And if they want to do something more, like say a user wants to log in, or you have comments on your website, or there's some kind of e-commerce, then use APIs to interact with those different services, maybe your backend service, or maybe a third party like Stripe, Algolia, etc. And so there are things that you can do with static sites. Static sites don't mean just boring, basic brochure kind of sites. They're just pre-built and hosted on a CDN or a bunch of servers as static HTML. That's what I mean when I say static site. Okay, cool. So I got this from a site, scotch.io, but I thought it described what I was trying to say. So if it's a static site, you've pre-built it, it's put on a server or a bunch of servers all over the world. So when a user makes a request, all you do is pull out that HTML. Or if it's a dynamic site built the other way that I was talking about, the monolithic architecture, every time a user makes a request, you pull out data, you build it together, and you return that site. And so that's what I mean when I say static versus dynamic in this talk moving forward. So all of these are examples of static sites, right? Like so this is what the Jamstack is, by the way, this ecosystem where you build sites this way, this new way of hosting it as a static site on a CDN and requesting it. And all of these are companies that have their sites as static sites today. Like that symbol stands for Smashing Magazine, where it's a 15,000 plus page site. It's really big. They have a lot of comments. They have user login. They have this concept of members. They have e-commerce. And then Nike's sites and campaigns are all static sites. They have their own Nike CMS, which is a headless CMS that they've built themselves. And Vue.js, React, these are all like sites that are static. Peloton, also the biking site, biking company. There's a static site. And it's not static the way anyone describes static, right? It's not a simple site. It's a site like anyone that we interact with. And so these are all built this new way. And so that's what the Jamstack is. Jamstack stands for JavaScript, APIs, and markup. And it's saying that you pre-build your site, put it on a CDN as a static site, any moving parts, interact with it with the API. But okay, this is again another image in case it wasn't clear. So there are several aspects of this Jamstack, right? Like you need something now, a tool that will build all your sites the static way. And that's where the first one, the static site generators come into play. If you've heard of Gatsby, Hugo, these are all static site generators, middlemen. So based on the language or the tool you're comfortable with, you can pick a static site generator. And it'll basically take all your source files and compile that into a static site. And then you need a CDN itself. And CDNs these days are pretty commercial. It's no longer like Facebook and CNN who are putting it on Akamai or something. You have like Fastly, you have MaxCDN, you have so many players in this space, Amazon, like CloudFront, for instance. So you can pick and choose what you want, treat them like any other service, pay for more of that CDN as you want, distribute it. It's immediately distributed all over the world. And they take care of things like cache invalidation and rollbacks and all of the things that DNS propagate, like DNS management for you. And so it's easy to build a site today as a static site, host it on a CDN, and have your users do this. And you might be wondering, like, if you haven't already, like, why would someone do this? Last time when I spoke about this, I tried to give the example of how you would make the perfect peanut butter sandwich, peanut butter jelly sandwich. So if peanut butter and jelly are in two separate boxes, you can choose how much ever of what you want and make that perfect sandwich. But that didn't really like sync with the audience too much, so I have a different example for you guys. Let's say that you wanted to go and build a burrito. Or not build a burrito, you make a burrito. So you go into this store where there's one person who makes that burrito for you. They have to saute the vegetables, they have to get the meat ready, they have to do all the different things that are in it. Versus now you go to Chipotle and everything is spread out. There's one person for each functionality, right? And so every time, so if I go to restaurant one and every time someone orders a burrito, one person has to do everything for them on the fly and give it to you. Whereas if you go to a Chipotle, you can service so many more people because you have this assembly line of people doing each one, doing its own functionality. So I think this idea might resonate more where you're saying that you decouple the front end from the back end. You have like this front-end developers who build the static site, the back-end developers who build your APIs, and they're each doing this, but together you get an amazing site with all the functionality. And so you can see how performance, like the site is going to be way faster. All you're doing is pulling out a static HTML file. Like it's already pre-built, it's on the CDN. So accessing that site is going to be way faster. Like that smashing example that I showed you, they went from 800 milliseconds built on like a WordPress, Ruby, they were using Shopify for their e-commerce, to 80 milliseconds when they went the Jamstack way. And this is for their, when users accessed it, right? And so every day, I mean, as a solutions architect, I'm talking to people on a daily basis who want to use Netlify. Netlify just enables you to do all this, right? Like you don't have to use Netlify. But people are like, hey, we're moving the Jamstack way because users want faster websites, and we realize that this is a way to build faster websites, and so we're going to do this. And so that's performance is one leading reason. And then there's security, right? Like in the monolithic architecture, you have databases, you have web servers, app servers, and you have all these moving parts, which you have to constantly keep, which are first of all holes where people can attack you. You've heard of SQL injection attacks and all of these. And you have to keep like monitoring them, like if it's WordPress, all these plugins, you have to update them, you have to make sure that there's no vulnerabilities, etc. Keep doing all of that. But with static sites, like the surface area for an attack is reduced. It's just static HTML, CSS, and so where can someone attack you? Except, of course, if you use APIs, and so there's that vulnerability, but all these services now come with their own beefed up security. So there's no concept of like, oh, I should secure my server now. There's no server, you're putting it on a CDN, and CDNs have their own policies for security. And so it's more secure, and it scales more easily because you're not now, they're saying that, oh, okay, today I have 1 million users hitting my website, tomorrow I have 10 million. I don't have to, there's no servers or databases that you have to sit and scale and orchestrate and manage, right? Because it's all in a CDN, it's put on that. You're building it previously and putting it on the CDN, and that can scale as you pay more money for them to do it. And so if you're wondering, like Google Cloud Platform or Amazon S3, these are all great places to host your site, right? They're all static assets, you can put it on them. Zeit is another service that provides a similar way where you can host static sites, and Netlify is one of them too. So now you might be wondering, like, where does serverless fit in? And then what if I want to handle payments on my website, for instance? How does a static site handle that? Or what if I want to, like, yes, you can run scripts through JavaScript. JavaScript can do that for you. But what if you don't want to make an API token accessible through your script or through your site? You want to store that as an environment variable somewhere else. And that's where serverless fits in with the static site. I mean, first of all, I think if a site is static, it's serverless. You're not maintaining your own servers. You're putting it on a CDN. But then where serverless functions fits in is when you want to do like server-side processing for a static site. And so, again, all of these different services you can use for it, like AWS Lambda, serverless framework lets you set up functions in all of these different platforms. It's an easy way to get started. Zeit, that other company that I mentioned that allows you to host static sites, they have something called Now. They have something called Now where you can deploy serverless functions. And Netlify has its own functions, which is basically built on AWS Lambda. So through Netlify, I mean, I'm going to focus on how you would get started with functions using Netlify, but it's anyway just built on AWS Lambda, so it's just an easier way to do it. Where you have Netlify hooks up with your Git vendor, so that's why you say you're putting all your code on GitHub, for instance. You also add your functions code, and as part of that repository, Netlify will build your site. It'll put the static site on a CDN, and it'll deploy that function through Lambda. And that's how we allow you to hook up functions with your static site. And so I'm going to try and demo this. Let's see how that goes. Any questions so far? Yeah. No. I'll show you in the demo, but then it's built over AWS Lambda, but then we do that configuration for you. We deploy it into our own AWS account, so you don't, as an end user or a developer, don't need that. It's basically like Netlify's ethos, if that's the word. We make it easy, like we want to give a very easy developer experience when you're building your site. So we extend that to even Lambda, where like we understand that it can be complicated, that world. And so we'll abstract all of that for you. We'll deploy the functions for you and give you a URL endpoint that you can access through your site. Yeah?
Who?
So the framework essentially is what you'd have in AWS, where you have your Lambda function working with your S3 and then working with your CloudFront and then API gateway. So what's the major difference between that kind of framework and Netlify?
Yeah, I mean, you can achieve the same thing with that. Netlify, like, I want to think that the biggest difference is developer experience. Okay. Like, it's made super simple. Like, you click a button, everything is set up for you. You don't have to manage that orchestration as much with these 4 different services. With one click, you've hooked up to GitHub. We provide that CDN, so everything is an easier workflow. But you can achieve the same thing with.
The other question I have is, with CDNs, you have to deal with TTLs and validations and all of that. What happens if the CDN clears all your cache? How do you recover your files?
Well, that's the thing, that Netlify CDN is built in a way where we don't call it the CDN, we call it the ADN, Application Delivery Network. But everything from atomic rollbacks for your site and handling that cache and validation is maintained by Netlify. So unless you push a new version of your site, your cache doesn't get, purged. Yeah. There's always a new version of site on our ADN, and that's what we serve to you. So we manage all of that for you.
So, and the other question is, Netlify works based off, I don't know if I'll call it eventual consistency, because it's an edge. It's not gonna distribute immediately, right?
Yeah, but it's an atomic deploy. So every time we deploy a new version of your site, it's the whole new version of the site. There's never like a state where half your site is now updated. Yeah. So we'll wait for the whole site to be deployed. We'll deploy it, and then we'll give you a URL to that new site.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Hang on.
You mentioned previously that static websites have better security and performance than dynamic ones. If you could give us some examples of reference architecture or some use case studies, because I can argue either way. Mm-hmm. I can build an argument where a dynamic website fits the bill and is better than a static one. So I guess to compare apples to apples, can you please give us more examples?
Yeah, sure. Probably at the end of the demo, I can dive
at the end
into
of the demo. She didn't finish presentation, so we're going to...
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to walk through how you deploy a site on Netlify and then add functions to it and build up from there.
So you can use the time to get the raffle tickets from me if you don't have them.
Were you talking to me?
Are you finished? Okay.
Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, this is what my dashboard looks like. I have a bunch of sites that have been deployed to Netlify, right? So these are all static sites. So for instance, if we go in here, I have a particular site. It's password protected, but let's see if this works. Yeah. I mean, so this is an example of a site that's built with the Hugo static site generator. It just has a bunch of blogs, and it has some contact forms. Basic site. But let's see what would happen if we had to build a whole new site from scratch. I'll go into this. So either you can just drag and drop files at the bottom, and Netlify will build those for you. Or you can just say, I'm going to deploy a new site from Git. Or there's a great starting place called templates.netlify.com, which I use, where it's a one-click deploy to Netlify. I'll just show you. And then I'm going to use a Hugo blog as well. So you see this deploy to Netlify button. It's basically going to ask permission if it can deploy this to your, clone this repository to GitHub. Here you go, functions, demo. Saving and deploying, so let's just hope this builds pretty quickly. So you can see that the site deploys in progress, and it's enqueued. So basically what's happening now, it knows that it's a Hugo, it's using the Hugo static site generator. Netlify's build bots are building the site as a static site. It's installing, because it's the first time it's doing it, it's installing all the modules that's necessary for it. And while that happens, I'll just show you a quick overview of what this dashboard looks like, if you're interested. So yeah, it picks up names for your, random names, so it's pretty amusing sometimes, amusing surely. But otherwise, you can set up like custom domains with it. You can get a free SSL certificate. And let's see, I just need to keep talking till the site builds, right? Okay, it's built. So if you just click on that, now it's live on the Netlify CDN. It's your static site. It has a bunch of blogs again. So what I wanted to show now was this is the GitHub repository that's associated with it. And when you want to add a function to this site, all Netlify is looking for is a folder which contains all these different scripts. So I am going to add that. Let's see. I need to copy paste something so that I don't make a mistake. We're going to go through the Hello World example. So I create a new functions, hello.js, copy paste. And I'm going to commit directly to master, which, for a demo where I'm just hoping everything goes well. Yeah, actually, creating a pull request is really cool because Netlify creates these things called, let me show you, it's actually really cool. Oh, it's not. Like for instance, we show these deploy previews. So every time you make a pull request, we create a deploy preview of your site. So the site's not live, but it's still a version of your site that's on the CDN. And you can like share this with people and say, hey, do these edits look good? If it looks good, then you can go and actually publish this and make it live. So it'll be basically your site name with a hash in front of it. And you can share this around with people, get approval. Anyway, so back to this. Let's see. So every time you make a change on your Git repository or to your site content, basically, Netlify is going to pick it up. So you can see how this particular thing was picked up. The site got built. It said that was for create hello.js. It was deployed in 18 seconds. Now we just need to let Netlify know where these functions live and that we actually have a function here. So I'll go into my TOML file and I will let Netlify know that this is where my functions live. And then I'm again going to do this bad practice and then commit. Again, Netlify is going to pick this up. Should have. Let's see. So you can see that I update my TOML file. It's again another change. Netlify is hooked up to my GitHub, so it's pulled that and it's building the new version of my site. Site is live. Also, these builds are taking so less time because barely anything's changing on the site, right? Like there's just a few changes, so only those, that's going to get built. And so now the function is live. Netlify knows where to find it. So if you go into your functions here, the tab, you can see that, oh, this has been created. And you can access the function through, like, so for instance, now this is the actual site. And the function can be accessed through the site name .netlify functions hello world. So essentially, we deploy this to we deploy this to our AWS Lambda, and during the site build, we zip it up and push it to AWS Lambda. We configure that service discovery and API gateway, all of that for you. And all we do is give you a URL relative to your site on how to trigger this function. And so you can go and see that this was triggered. There's a log that says that it was invoked, and any console.log messages that you have within your function will appear in these logs. So it takes away it abstracts all the stuff you need to do within AWS to deploy that function. It's an easy way to deploy it, but it's the same kind of thing. You can add any kind of script here. There are some limits though with Netlify. Like, it's free. Like, you get 125,000 invocations per month, and but there are some limits where I think it's 128 megabytes of memory and 10 to 30 seconds of execution time per function, which you can tweak with Netlify. And then, so you can write functions in JavaScript or Go. And beyond this, like, I mean, this is just the hello world function. So I wanted to show you what some other functions look like. Like, I had already deployed another site which has a bunch of different functions. So this is the site. I mean, it has the examples and it has the same functions running as well. So if you look in here, there's hello.js, hello sync, like there's a bunch of different ones. So I'm just going to quickly walk through them to see what it looks like. I mean, so if you're familiar with AWS Lambda, it's pretty similar, wherein each function is looking for this handler method and for exporting the handler method, and it just looks for 3 parameters: event, context, and callback. Event and context are parameters that Netlify provides, and callback is something that you have to write. And so this one, all it did was simply return the hello world. But you can also do things like, for instance, here, it's taking in a parameter and displaying that. I mean, these are just like really basic examples. There's another one I wanted to show you where you're using a third-party API within the function. And some lame Chuck Norris joke, but then let's see what it pulls up. Whatever. Fastest and most effective way to die is to point a gun at Chuck Norris. Blah. But anyway, so you can point to like Stripe, Algolia, any kind of third-party API service that you want to use within your site when your user does something. And you all know what you can do with the serverless function. This was about how you can add serverless functions to a static site. And then the last one is a little more involved, where it shows how to set up build environment variables through the Netlify dashboard, and then like send a Slack message when you send a message. So I don't know how I'm going to show this because it's not like I'm logged into Slack here, but then if I do say hello, I'm going to get a message on my channel saying hello. So I've hooked up the function to basically send a webhook and trigger a message on my channel in Slack. So going back to this, where is it? Demo. Here. This is just a starting point. Any questions here on how you can add? Yeah.
Sort of like a key store service. So if I had my function and I wanted to call a database or an API like Slack, maybe Slack's a bad example, but something where I have secure keys, I don't want to put those keys in Git.
Yeah.
So is there
a
way to secure those somewhere?
Yeah. So you can put them as build environment variables within Netlify, so that like how I put the Slack webhook URL here. So during the build or when the function's invoked, we'll pull that out for you. There were some things I wanted to tell you. Yeah, these are very simple examples, but more like a just, are we?
We still have time. You're good.
Okay, cool. There is a really cool resources page that I wanted to show you called functions.netlify.com. And that one is community driven. So we add all these examples from people who have built like a spam filter, or how do you send an email via SendGrid, or do a MailChimp integration. And all these are just different functions, right? Like, so it gives you the source code to do that. And so there's both example, and tutorials. And all this is like anyone who's built with Netlify functions anywhere in the world, we add it to this site. So there's a big repository of examples that you can look over here. So, the last thing I wanted to, this is literally my last slide, but what I wanted to say was, there's also the Netlify Lambda CLI. So if you feel like you want to work on this locally, use your modern JavaScript framework and test this out locally before actually deploying it, you can use the Netlify Lambda CLI. There's a node module, NPM module called Netlify Lambda that you can use. And then there's logs that we provide, so you can actually see the one that I showed you. You can write functions either in JavaScript or Go with at the moment, and you can only deploy Lambda functions. Like beneath the covers, it's only Lambda at this point. We'll potentially add more services, so you can run Google Cloud Functions or Azure, for instance. And you can customize it. Like I said, by default, you get 10 seconds of execution time and 128 megabytes, but you can always tweak that to be 30 seconds and a higher memory for your functions itself. So that's pretty much it from me.
We have 5 more minutes for questions if you have any. Okay.
So I have a question on how to build a password-protected website using the tool. Because you show us the password-protected one, but that one is actually a paid feature from you guys, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think
so.
I think next Tuesday our pricing is completely changing and our packages are changing. So I don't know if my point is I don't know if password protection is still a paid feature.
Yeah, because I tried it to using what you show, to kind of put a Lambda functions to do issue a auth token and then pass it back into my static website. I just couldn't figure out how to do it. Because I just don't know how to actually use put off tokens to protect it myself.
Well, you can either use Netlify Identity is free, that basically does authentication for your application, or you can use Okta One Login for your web applications to just lock that site down.
Or you can message her after the meeting and she can troubleshoot it for you. Any other questions?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Is there any sort of capabilities that Netlify would offer as far as performance and number of executions or traffic information from the sites?
Oh, from the sites.
Yeah, so you can see how much people are using it.
Yeah, we don't have it yet, but we're working on what's called Netlify Analytics. So it gives you everything that a Google Analytics would give you, where's your traffic coming from, how much of it's from which region, what's the most commonly viewed page, etc. So not yet here.
I think you asked number of functions that were called. It does tell you out of your quota. It does tell you 37 out of 50,000 or whatever your limit is.
Yeah, if it's functions, I thought you meant for the overall site. Yeah. Okay.
In extreme security cases where you would have to restrict the website by IP address, sometimes you can get the IP address from CDNs like CloudFront, but it costs a lot. Not sure how that would work if Netlify.
Oh, you mean if you want to know the IP that your user's hitting you from?
No, the IP
Or
address for the
restrict
edge. Yeah, for the edge, for the CDNs.
Well, we do have a bunch of smaller private CDNs that we do spin up for clients. For instance, Citrix has their own staging CDN that they use, and so we're able to restrict only those Citrix users with certain IPs to access that particular CDN. Is that what you asked, or something else?
Something else.
Oh, you mean the IP addresses of the servers?
Yes.
Yeah, we do provide A records if you want to point it to our CDN. So we do have the IP address of a load balancer that we can give.
Okay.
But why do you ask?
No, there's been cases where, for security, the companies want to know based off the IP and not just the URLs or CNAMEs and stuff like that. That's why I asked.
Yeah.
The other question I wanted to ask was how friendly is Netlify with continuous integration and continuous deployment tools?
Well, Netlify itself provides CI/CD workflow. Do you mean
Like,
as
can
a
I
capability
use
or with some.
can I use my choices?
You could, but it would be redundant. Like,
Like actually, that's a good question because, for example, I usually use Circle CI
Yeah.
with at work and for my personal projects. So could I just take my existing Circle CI configuration, which has a bunch of deploy steps, for
Yeah.
example, and add a Netlify deploy step if I wanted to
yeah,
for some reason?
you could. Like, you can hook up their webhooks in and out of Netlify. So maybe one step in that your existing flow is to now trigger a deploy on Netlify.
Oh, I guess that's true because I could use like a git push or something,
Yeah.
and it would trigger it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
After this, one more question.
Oh, thank you. I wonder if any limitations managing the source of a static website. I have a use case. I'm managing a website developed by WordPress. It has about 2 gigabytes media files or code files. So I want to convert it to static and then use your solution deploy to S3 bucket.
Okay.
Is that doable? And also I want to proxy, let's say reserve proxy by Nginx.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, I would say, like, so Netlify provides that there's the CI/CD workflow aspect and there's the hosting aspect. So when you use Netlify, you get the benefits of, like I said, instant cache and validation or rollbacks when you use both of them together. So if you're using Netlify just to build or just that CI/CD pipeline bit and then pushing your static files to S3, then you don't even have to use Netlify at that point. Like, you can just build it elsewhere. Or you could build the whole site using Netlify's build workflow and then host it on Netlify. So, like, you know, like, do you get the difference? Like, you don't have to build on Netlify and then host elsewhere. Like, you could do the whole thing with Netlify itself.
Can I convert the WordPress website to static and use your solution?
Yeah. It's a common migration that we see.
So thank you. Thank you so much. So last time, the major objection for the meetup was that you didn't have enough time to network, so we want to fix it. So I would suggest cutting the Q&A now, and then at the end, after Mark is done with second presentation, then you can mingle and ask questions one-on-one.
Also, there's like Jamstack stickers.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. We can share them. Like, so thank you so much. Mark, where are you? Mark? Shelly? Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I would have to let her know this is later, but
Yeah, after. Also, like, we're always looking for presenters, so if you are interested, there is a Slack channel. You can join a Slack community through slack.serverlesstoronto.org, and then submit the topic you want to talk about. If you want to hear about specific topics, like, just ping me or message anybody in the Slack. We can always organize the presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark McQuade. I'm a solutions architect at Onica. And I'm just going to go over a solution with you guys today that I built recently for a customer. Transcription and sentiment analysis pipeline for call center recordings. Okay, there we go. So just a little quick bio about me, solutions architect at Onica. And actually, I've had a telephony background for 15 years prior to that. A little bit of self-indulgence there with the certs. A little bit about Onica. I won't get into too much detail. 400 plus AWS certifications throughout our staff. Premier consulting partner 4 years in a row. 500 plus customer engagements. Like I said, I won't get into too much detail on that. So essentially, as my time in telephony, what I experienced as pain points for contact centers specifically, I don't know if there's any contact center folks in the building, but with transcription, right? So the recordings of their call center recordings, they are manually transcribed mostly, right? So some of the pain points are the cost of manual transcription, it's not real time, manual process limits the amount of calls that we can Q&A. Simple transcription isn't good enough, right? So just transcribing audio to text isn't good enough. Need to recognize certain blacklisted words. Splitting the agent and the caller audio is pretty big. That's something that obviously isn't done in a manual process, and pulling keywords from the calls. So the specific use case that I had was a customer wanted the contact center audio files transcribed, right? So simply speech to text. They didn't want anything else. They didn't request anything else. They were currently just sending the files to Philippines for manual transcription only, no sentiment analysis being performed. Simply, here's my audio file, convert it to text, right? They didn't want to manage any infrastructure. Cost was a major factor. They wanted an end-to-end solution and wanted the ability to extract keywords as well. So the solution that we came up with. So here's the AWS services we used. So Amazon Transcribe, which is the automatic speech recognition service within AWS, text-to-speech essentially. Comprehend, which is the natural language processing service within AWS. You can do things like pull key phrases, sentiment, get sentiment score, detect the language, AWS Lambda, AWS step functions, which essentially just manages the state of the jobs and visualization for that, and Amazon Connect. So Amazon Connect is AWS's managed, hosted contact center service. So that is to actually transcribe and provide sentiment on the audio files. To analyze them, we went with Athena, which is for interactive queries, SQL queries to your data, AWS Glue, which is a managed ETL service that AWS has, and QuickSight, which is for visualization and analysis, just a business intelligence tool. So here's the architecture. So Connect, being the contact center, the user calls in to Connect, speaks to an agent, right? Whatever is said, automatically it's recorded. As soon as the call is disconnected, it gets sent into S3, okay? So from there, it triggers a Lambda function which splits the audio. So there's one of the pain points. Audio agent over here, customer over here, right? Which then triggers another Lambda function which invokes step functions. And step functions just monitor the job of the actual transcribe, the transcribe job. So check the transcription status, check, done, done, done. When it's done, okay, move on, right? So move that transcribe document, which is a JSON file, into an S3 bucket. So then continued that. Once that JSON file is put into S3, and that's the transcribe, it triggers another Lambda function which creates the sentiment analysis job, which is comprehend, and key phrases and sentiment analysis are then pulled from that, which, among other things, that's just kind of what they were looking for. And then Athena, Glue, and QuickSight are used for the analysis, right? So Athena's going to query Glue, and QuickSight's going to display it all, right? So, and we also came up with an alternate analysis for them because they wanted to see a word cloud, right, of key phrases kind of popping out of the screen, colorful. So we also created Elasticsearch and Bhavana for them so they could do it that way. QuickSight's really good at analyzing data. It's limited for what it can display for charts and graphs. So Bhavana has pretty good for that. It is better in that sense, I'd say. But QuickSight's better for analysis itself, so. So this is just some screenshots, right? So this is in the console, this is Transcribe, right? So this is the job itself, right? So you can see it as a job name, status. You've got applied vocabulary. So what Transcribe has is something called a custom vocabulary that you can put in place, where if you're going to know certain things about your recordings, certain words that will be said that you know could get incorrectly classified, then you could put a custom vocabulary together. It's just a text file that you put in. Maybe it's names. Maybe it's, for this specific use case, it was hotels. So Caesar's Palace, like we put in there, Harrah's. And so it's going to recognize and pick that up. Speaker identification is disabled for these, but that's just if you want to know who the speaker is and it identifies. And channel identification is actually new. I believe that's if you can put multiple audio files in at once, and then it joins them all together as one transcription. So this is just more from the console and Transcribe. So this is what it shows you. There's the text from the audio file, and you can see how it's written out, and then there's the speaker identification and the channel identification, 2 tabs. And then the JSON of it. So again, there's the request, it's put in, and there's the response, right? It's pretty simple, and the main, obviously, part of the response is the transcript, right? So that is what is put in the S3 bucket when we built this out. So here's comprehend. Again, in the console, you see, you put in the text, you analyze, and it can provide you with entities, key phrases, language, sentiment, and the syntax. So here's some of the entities that it pulls out. Amazon.com, it's an organization, 90% confidence. Seattle, location, 89% confidence, right? So it's a pretty powerful tool. And there's, again, that's how it looks in the JSON form. Entities, the score, the type, the text, and offset. So here's just a quick screenshot of QuickSight. On the left there, under the sentiment underscore SQL, that's the SQL queries that you set up. So the benefits of QuickSight, I find, is you can set up your own queries on what to pull, right, from that data. So you set up a custom SQL query, pulls whatever it is. So in this case, we pulled, no, I can't really see that, but we pulled positive, negative sentiment. Sentiment was really big for them, right? I mean, as it is, I believe in most contact centers, you're not going to analyze calls that are neutral. You want to know what's really positive and what's really negative, right? So once you do that, and then you just build your own visualization types in the bottom left there. This was just an example of one where you see the transcript on the right, and you see the ID. That's the ID on the left there of the actual audio file. So this is how it looked in Kibana, because like I said, they wanted this keyword cloud, so it kind of pops out at them. And you can state at the top, number of transcribed calls, 61, average yeah, I know. Average positive sentiment score, 76%, and then count of key phrases, right? So this goes back to them wanting to pull out blacklisted words, right? So you can pull that out by extracting the key phrases. So with Elasticsearch, though, it just pumps everything into Elasticsearch, so you can't actually query what you want like you can in QuickSight. And it just pumps everything into Elasticsearch, and then you can build your graphs and charts in Kibana based on that. So, and there's just a second page. Again, there's the transcript, right? And there's the sentiment, positive sentiment, neutral sentiment, and negative sentiment, right? And like I said, it's something I think that's the most impactful thing for contact centers is knowing that. And I wanted to throw this in there as worth mentioning because Amazon Lex, I don't know if you guys have any exposure with Lex. Lex is one of my favorite AWS services, right? So it's your chatbot service, right? It's your conversational interface. So when you're dealing with contact centers, you can really reduce the amount of manual intervention when you put a chatbot in front, right? So you have, you front end your contact center with a chatbot, and that can take down a lot of the manual intervention on what needs to be done. Essentially, you can really take out the need for an actual agent with a bot, right? So again, removes the need for manual upfront diagnosis of the calls, and it adds a very powerful tool to your contact center workflows. It's actually, the other day I read a great stat, Gartner had a stat that in the year 2021, they think that companies will be spending more on chatbot development than on web and mobile app development. So that just shows you how powerful chatbots are right now. And just don't get help, don't do it alone slide, you can visit aws.amazon.com/Canada/AWS-Canada-partners, and you'll find obviously Onica in there. There's my email if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, and there's my LinkedIn as well if anyone wanted to reach out directly. And that's it. I mean, just a brief kind of overview of something I built recently that I think is pretty cool. It's serverless, and it touches on AI services, right? So AI and ML, which I'm pretty passionate about AI and ML as well, so yeah.
Mark, tell them how long it took you to build all of this.
I actually built that in under 3 weeks. In under 3 weeks, I built that. So
that's the power of serverless.
Yeah,
it's not about the code, it's about the value for the client, how quickly you can produce it.
Actually, and I will mention, so cost was a big factor to them. I don't know what they were paying by sending the calls over to Philippines for manual transcription, but if you factor in only Transcribe into this, 49 cents for 50 files they get. So you can build this out as a contact center, right? So calls are recorded in the contact center, but you can also build this out for meetings, for example, right? You just bypass a step and you drop those audio files or those MP4 video files into S3 and start the trigger, you process it at that point, right? So 49 cents is what it cost us to do 61 files for them. I mean, you can't beat that cost, right?
It's a very impressive solution, actually. I got the point, the last point, the analytics is very impressive.
Yeah.
Because now it's all about AI and machine learning.
Exactly.
And companies, they want to know where to focus on. It's very impressive. The other question that I have is, what about those audio files? Do you save them in S3, or do you archive those files? Because you mentioned cost effective too, like it's very cost effective.
Yeah.
So what do you do with those audio files? Do you eventually delete them, get rid of them, or because in contact centers, it eventually gets up a lot of files.
So actually, with this customer specifically, we actually, they wanted them deleted after, I think it was a 3-month window. That's what their kind of compliance was to hold the files for. So we didn't actually set up an automatic deletion for them or anything, but obviously we could. But yeah, 3 months was their timeline to keep the WAV files. These were WAV files they provided, so. And again, you could get WAV files. So say, for an example of product review, right? So say people are calling in and leaving voicemails on product review. Well, you just drop it into the customer bucket, for example. So you bypass that split audio step. It's one person. You drop it into the customer audio, and then it just triggers the whole flow, right? So it doesn't have to be front-ended with Connect. That's the full solution. But there's a lot of ways that you could build this to suit specific needs.
Okay. I have 2 questions about translation and training. So are there any internal Amazon services that you can hook up and automatically translate to French or Spanish?
Amazon Translate is actually one of the AI services called Amazon Translate. So it actually just translates to whatever language you want.
Okay. And then second one about training. Are you able to train your model?
So in this scenario, because you're using the AI APIs from Amazon, the pre-built ones, right? So they have the pre-built AWS AI services are Poly, Lex, Transcribe, Translate, Recognition, right? So you don't actually manipulate the model in those scenarios, right? Where if you want to actually do model manipulation, then you'll go into SageMaker and you'll build your own model, right? So these are pre-built out-of-the-box models that you can't actually, you just use the service, right?
Well, is that service able to recognize various accents based on region?
Yes. Yeah. It's actually unbelievable when you run with Poly, for example. When you put stuff through these services, it's unbelievable what they can recognize, right? Because I mean, this is AWS. This is their machine learning and their artificial intelligence, right? They're really fine-tuned to recognize that. I mean, ask Daniel. Daniel has a great story about your accent, right? In what was it? Yeah, they recognize, as you say all the time, that you couldn't believe it recognizes it. Yeah.
I talked to one of the product managers when this came out about a year ago. I was talking to them, and they basically said, Siri's good, right? Siri will get you 85% of the way there, but that's not sufficient for enterprise quality services. That's why they spend a lot longer releasing the service. So their target is 93% accuracy at that point. And that's before they started, that was just to get to release. They've enhanced it since. So I've had a few people I've gotten to go through and run it with some fairly heavy accents, and it's come through very well. But the best thing is to go and test it.
Yeah.
To go test these services. Well, Mark, you can explain how hard is it to go and test it?
No, and I mean, yeah, in the console itself, for like I showed you the screenshots, you know, comprehend, for example, you just copy paste a snippet of text in, and then you just hit analyze, right? Or transcribe, you just pop in. You don't have to actually have a flow built with Lambda functions. You can actually just go to the console to test it out, drop in a WAV file or an MP3 file, and it'll spit out the results, right? So, sorry. No, I didn't actually. So the only S3 we had to work with was putting the triggers for Lambda, right? So files go in, trigger. But this was a POC, right? So we didn't worry about any actually events or anything like that, or CloudWatch alarms or anything. No. Oh, sorry. Are you saying? Sorry, I thought you were saying for alarms. Sorry. Yeah. So the trigger S3 had a trigger setup and triggers a Lambda function. Yes, for events. Yes. Sorry. So yeah, no problem. So in S3, right? So the S3 bucket. Yeah, sorry. So there you go. So each bucket there had a notification that triggered a Lambda function, right? So that's how it was set up. Yeah, it's actually pretty simple, right? I mean, once you have, you know, providing an end solution like this, it looks pretty complex, but as you go through it, it actually isn't, right? It's actually pretty simple because AWS provides such, you know, pre-built solutions already, right?
Yeah, my question kind of builds on that a bit, just in, well, I guess I have two parts. One you might have answered is like, yeah, did you have to use any CloudFormation? Like, do you template this to push it up, or you're just going through the admin and kind of setting it up?
So this actually was not templated, but yes, a better case would be to use a CloudFormation template to build it all up, yeah.
And then, yeah, my second question was like, how much of this is like out-of-the-box code, and how much are you?
You know what? So I'm not a developer. I know there's a lot of developers in here, so I'm not a developer. So I used all my Lambda functions were written in Python, you know, with Bodo, and you know what? I mean, it wasn't terribly difficult. And like I said, I'm not a developer, right? So I mean, for the amount of people in this room that said they were developers, I'm sure it'd come a lot easier to them, right?
It's pretty amazing how much you can glue together.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean, right? The customer was extremely happy because all they wanted was transcribed text, right? So here's a WAV file, now give me the transcription, and then we built so many other things onto it for them that in such a short amount of time that they couldn't believe it, right? They couldn't believe it.
Yes, I'm curious about the quality of the sentiment analysis. Last time I tried it, if you have some ambiguous sentences, is both the score and the positive or negative sentiment is way out of the target, right? So your feeling,
my personal opinion with the sentiment has always been good. I mean, if we dropped a WAV file in there and the person was yelling about the situation, it recognized it, you know, 99%, you know, that's what it saw, right? The sentiment was negative. Same thing if they're like, oh, you're amazing, thank you so much, the positive was there. You can get into certain aspects where it might, you know, get confusing. If you, exactly, right? Like if you use, I've had it, not in this specifically, but something else where, you know, it was actually a bot that I built where I had sentiment built into the bot. So if you are interacting with a chat bot and then it recognizes negative sentiment, it's going to send you to an agent, right? And someone said, like if you said garbage, so not in a negative concept, but if you said garbage, it would send it. It thinks that it's negative. So yes, there is sometimes, but in my personal experience, I've had nothing but, you know, positive feedback on the sentiment.
Oh, hey, Mark. Back here, sorry. Yeah, so I had a chance of working with Amazon Connect and AWS Transcribe 3 times, and the issue that I always had with it, and so I'm just trying to get your perspective on it.
Yep.
Because maybe you have a solution or it was good enough. But the issue I always had was that with Amazon Connect, Amazon Connect, the recording, if you do a soft call, is not the same quality if you do it from your phone. So do you know what I mean? Like the call would be a bit of lower quality. And then also, when that audio recording was transcribed, even with keywords put in, I wasn't getting the accuracy that I was hoping for. So, but my use case was like I wanted 100% because I was transcribing videos, or calls or stuff. And so maybe your use case it's okay because you're using comprehend and you just need good enough.
Yep.
But I was just wondering if like
so
if
that the key to that is the custom vocabulary. So there's actually a great there's a great blog written that.
Sorry, do you mean like you put it like the feature? Because I actually plugged it in and I still didn't get the results.
You put the custom vocabulary in, you didn't
get
it?
I was
Really,
very thorough about it. But I mean, I was just wondering like comprehend, because that's really interesting. I was just wondering if there was any chance to clean up, because like when you're doing NLP, because like another project I work on, we get these government documents and we OCR them, and so we have a data scientist guy that cleans them up using NLP, and so I was wondering if it had like the common NLP kind of functions that you could put in there and then massage that information so you get a better result.
So comprehend's limited for what you can do for massaging.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, yeah. But what I would say is, that's surprising you said that about the transcription, because there's actually a great blog out there, and I forget now the customer, but they actually use Transcribe for their closed captioning, right, on their videos. And it's essentially perfect. It's essentially perfect. Yeah, it is. It never, they put out training videos and they use Transcribe for the closed captioning, and it is on point. And that's because they implement a custom vocabulary, mind you. But at the same time, I mean, if they're putting these out to production and they're putting these out to the masses for their training videos, that closed captioning better be pretty good, right? So I have never experienced anything, but yeah. Yeah, I guess. I mean, you had mentioned, audio quality with Connect. I really have never experienced any audio quality issues with Connect. Yeah, okay. I'll look into that, actually. Yeah.
So quick question about the cost. You mentioned 49 cents per 55 files?
61.
61 files. What was
So it's based on, let me see if I can get the actual cost. But that's not end-to-end, mind you, right? So that is simply just the Transcribe cost. Because the customer only was focused in on Transcribe, we provided them all this, but it was always, here's a solution that we built, but you may just want to go with Transcribe. Here's the costing for Transcribe. A lot of this, when you're dealing with it, would fall under free tier, to be honest with you. This actually would fall under free tier. 61 would fall under free tier, but they wanted it as if they weren't in free tier. The cost itself is based on 15 seconds per 15 seconds of recorded files. So, and it's something like 0.006 cents, like for every 15 seconds. Like it's nothing, right?
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah, that was the metric that I was looking for.
Yeah, and I mean, what we did for them, all the recordings themselves were under 60 seconds. The majority of them were around 30 seconds. So yeah, it was really nothing when it came to cost.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay.
So it looks like everything goes directly to the transcribed text, like between the major phases.
Yep.
But you said that they would gather sentiment, like if someone was yelling. So I couldn't really see because it was pretty blurry on the wall.
So what happens with, I think I know what you're saying. So if you get, so as you run through Transcribe, it provides the transcription, right? The actual text from the speech. But from there, it then runs it through Comprehend. So that transcription is in Comprehend now, and you can then pull out of it all the things from Comprehend. The key phrases, the sentiment, the language, right? So it's essentially just daisy chaining Transcribe and Comprehend into one.
Sorry, so comprehend is on this side of the transcribed text, or is it on the other slide where it's on further to the right?
Yeah, Transcribe is right after this. So this is the first flow, or sorry, this is Transcribe. So this is the first flow, and then the next one is Comprehend.
Right, but it only has the text to go from. So, so it does caps, or like, because I know other systems will actually detect changes in intonation and
Yeah, it's not all caps, so that's a good question, actually. Let me look into that, actually. That's a good question.
Anybody else? Cool. I want to thank Mark. So last time you had only 15. We have more questions? No. Thank you, Mark. So last time we had only 15 minutes to network. Now we have more than almost 45 minutes. So enjoy the time. Thank you for coming. If you want to present what you solved serverlessly, any cloud, doesn't have to be Amazon, you're welcome to do this. This presentation was modeled after Amazon's This Is My Architecture videos. Short and sweet around the architecture and useful thing to solve. So please volunteer to do the talk like Mark. Floor is yours. And don't forget, next month we're going to have talk about startups from Amazon's leader in the space, and security talk from Andrew here. Same place. Before you go, I need to do raffle. So as you are mingling, anybody doesn't have the number? Anybody missing the number? Anybody needs a number? Don't go. Maybe you're the winner. You don't want a book? You don't? Okay. Okay, okay, let me do the draw. Okay, doing the draw. So can you put back the slide for the Manning before you stop the recording? So, okay guys, now I'm doing the draw for the book. So again, like why I worked with Manning, like they have real-time publishing, and there are forums. As the books are being written in real time, you learn about technology, you become friends with the authors, and then you'll learn from them through the books and through the forums. So let's see which one you're going to pick. I need glasses. The winner this month is 540865. Last three numbers, 565. Nobody? Okay, so probably that person left. Next attempt. Okay, so you lost your chance. I'm drawing another one. 54085552. Oh, cool, cool. So do you know which title do you like?
I got the number 13.
Okay, so I'm lucky I will not have to carry number 13. Number 13 is the only print book. The rest of them, they are e-books. So this is for you. Double check if I didn't put something else. Perfect, perfect. Take everything.